everyone. It is episode 403 of This Is Whole Life, live from Orlando, Florida, at the Whole Life Church. I don't know why I just did that, but
that
it
was
just
pretty great.
It just felt good. Maybe we'll try that
Add
more
that every week.
Every week. It's going to be a new feature here. Of course, we're here going deeper with the message that we are discussing here, and that was already presented last week. And if you swipe up in today's show notes, you can go to our sister podcast, Speaking of Grace, where you can hear that message just in case you missed it and want to know more or what we're referencing in greater detail. Also, we would love your comments, 407-965-1607 or podcast at wholelife.church. And this week, our farthest, well, at least for those that checked in, we had some people from all across the U.S. that were worshiping that actually, in our online family, that actually said, hey, I am watching from, and Haas, who was...
You're full of the sound effects.
I know, so maybe that's the thing for today. Haas and his family, Haas is one of our online worship hosts. They were, he said, in Happy Sabbath, WLC family, enjoying today's service from Mayaguez, Puerto Rico.
Boom.
Nice.
And he was in the chat like at least it was all of second service. And I'm just like, there you go. You're out and about, you're hanging out. Plus, how many people did we talk about this morning in staff meeting that we all knew like guests were here? Melanie, your parents had guests here. Mm-hmm. Ken, you bumped into a couple too, didn't you? Was that this week the story you told us this morning, or was that last week?
It's kind of a continuing story.
Story.
But yes.
So there you go. You never know.
Now that a different story, but we had a guest here that was moving here, I think from maybe Brazil.
Really?
Yeah.
I got an email from someone this week, it was last week. They're going to be moving, I think, from Loma Linda. And they watch every week. And I wish I'd have written down the name because they also listen to the podcast. So you know who you are. You're moving here. Make sure you stop and say hello.
We're going to need more seats. We're going to need more seats.
Yeah, if you could just add another 500 seats, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
We'll do it.
Yeah. Maybe is there a way we could put like a second tier in the center of the worship center?
Where the people who are really strong just hold up a chair over their head, right?
Some hammocks or something suspended.
No, I kind of like that idea.
I don't. Hammocks. I'm down for that for sure. Well, this weekend I was also really happy that I could help out with Ken's sermon prep.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that a lot.
All credit goes to Randy.
It was just the chuckles.
With an assist from Melanie.
And the chuckles behind me sitting in the front row was so awesome. I'm just going to tell you. And then Tito was like, yeah, nobody can get people thinking or cause them to pause quite like you, Randy. And I'm like, thanks a lot. No problem. I do what I can. What made it even funnier was if you have not tuned in or subscribed, better yet, to our newsletter, or if you don't follow us on YouTube, you probably haven't seen our 60-ish with Ken series, which was
60-ish seconds.
Right.
Maybe we should clarify.
It could be 60. No, it can't be 60 minutes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a short. And we love our shorts here, according to Stanley. But not so much because you didn't wear shorts. You wore pants. That's another story for another time. Anyway.
I'm so confused.
That was a squirrel moment. Ken, this week.
I'm sorry. You cannot just go past that without. Okay. No. So for those of you who are listening, Ken Wetmore here, by the way.
Ken Wetmore.
Melanie over in the corner. There we go.
And you're Melanie.
All right. And then Randy. I think you already said he was Randy. Yeah.
We did now.
But anyway, point being, we have staff meetings on Tuesdays, and that usually happens prior to recording this. So Stanley was saying that he got to be a judge for a film festival, a shorts film festival.
And it's literally called Love Your Shorts.
Love Your Shorts. So anyway, so that's
the reference.
Now you're in on the inside story there.
And if you love shorts, talk to Stanley. Maybe short movies, probably not shorts to pants. Jorts. I mean, we could go back. I think they're making a comeback, don't you think?
I have no idea.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what jorts are?
No.
Okay. Now, if you all go to the internet, go to your favorite web browser or your search
clam
engine.
diggers? Is that what they are?
I don't know. Maybe it could be. It sounds close.
Like thigh high type, or like the.
Well, the first one of the references that people love to use
calf,
if you're an NFL fan is go to Brett Favre getting the call. You can look it up online when he got the call that he was drafted and he was hanging out in Kiel, Mississippi with the family, and he's got a set of jean shorts with the roll on them, and so they get their jorts, their jean shorts. Yeah.
Okay.
So I really feel like I've seen the jorts coming back, which is a little bit scary.
I feel a little embarrassed that I didn't know that as somebody who grew up in the South.
Well, it was all over though. It was.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, no,
100%.
It comes back about every 30 years, I think.
I know. I've seen a lot of acid wash jeans lately too, with holes in the knees, and I'm like, wow.
You're gonna have
Class
to
of
dust
90.
off some banana clips and leg warmers.
You bring in the jelly shoes, it's an extra 500 points. Is all I'm saying. Oh man, this week when Ken said, "Man, I'm going to be talking about socioeconomic differences," I was really thinking to myself, wow, that is such a minefield. And Ken was really brave at the moment. It was just like, no, man, I think we're going to be okay. People are, and true to whole life. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, because I feel like overall we're pretty open-minded and we're pretty willing to, listen and maybe go, oh, maybe that's me, or maybe that should be me, or whatever point we're going for. So I can see where the safety came in, but also there was a lot of going on this past week. You can say like, oh yeah, So I knew you were hitting the right notes just based off of what was happening. And then Angeline confirmed that this morning. I think it was her section that was moving into those things. But I felt like,
in all fairness, there were several sections.
There was. I felt like I think it was well received, but the whole thing that I guess after listening to the message and just thinking about it over the weekend, like, wealth is so much about perspective,
isn't it?
Of just like absolute perspective, personal experiences, and I'd even say indoctrinated with, like, what you were growing up. Like, how did your family see money? How did they see themselves? Yeah. If you thought that you were poor, and then you look at it and someone would say, oh yeah, we're poor, and you think they think they're poor. We're like, wow, they've got something that, for whatever reason, your family held in maybe a little bit higher value than what they saw it as. And you go, man, they thought they were poor. And like, man, I'll tell you about poor. You'd have these conversations almost like a badge of honor, like who's most poor.
Yeah.
And I think
you don't hear a whole lot of presidential candidates bragging about how wealthy they grew up, right? It's like every time you hear from a presidential or any political candidate for that matter, it's, I worked my way up from the bottom and I did this and I did that. And there's not a whole lot that
class parents.
There's not a whole lot that come along with like, I'm a trust fund baby, and I have really, I've worked hard, but the truth is, I had a lot of advantages, just to be straight up with you. Not many people do that, right? No. And I think the reason is that we all value that. It's a funny thing, we don't enjoy suffering and pain, but we all also understand there's value to it, that there's a value to having accomplished something from the things that you've done, as opposed to just being handed something.
Sure. But I don't think most people, if you say, well, I'm doing quite well, thank you, I work really hard, and boy, they don't think they're rich, man, look at what they're so if you have the same conversation as the poor, going, man, you don't think you're poor, we used to eat rice and beans for breakfast and dinner, and that was only once a week, and you can almost get away with it. But on the other side, if you say the opposite, if you're like, well, I'm not wealthy to the point of, and sometimes it's very well meaning and it may very well be true to them in how they view it, but you don't get the same pass. Like, I'm trying to be humble, or I'm just trying to downplay because I've seen a lot of people get uncomfortable when, like, clients are like, oh, people wealthy. And it's like, well, you, like, even just complimenting as your financial advisor, like, hey, Ken, you've done a great job. Look at your account 10 years ago, and you've been investing, you've been doing what you're supposed to do.
Hang on a second. People get offended by that?
Oh, no, absolutely get offended, because
really,
what do you?
I would die for my financial advisor to do that. Well, man, Ken, look at what you've done.
No, but people seriously they worry about, if people know how much money that I invest into my thing, or if I've done well, there's at times there's guilt over it because, well, I have the knowledge of doing things, or I'm trusting you to do it, and someone else may not be either informed enough to do that or trusting enough to do it because they have trust issues with money because of the way they were raised. But there's an assumption that is rooted so deep in narratives that, the rich people are greedy and poor people are lazy.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be so not the case in like almost everyone I've ever worked with in finances. I mean, I had clients that were on every rung of that scale. The ones that are like, "Ooh, I don't want anyone to know that," it's like, well, it's just, you and me and payroll. Like, we're the only ones that know, and maybe your spouse if you show them your statements, but like nobody else knows. And other people that would work I had cafeteria workers who had saved like crazy, and you wouldn't assume. It's like, well, like you mentioned, some people, it depends on what car you have. They took the bus to work, and they were perfectly happy. And I'm like, so in some cases, the things that we assume is like, okay, you're rich, you're greedy, you're poor, maybe this or that, or you're really happy because you have money. But then the other part is, I've had so many people that, like, you go, oh, they have a huge house and they've got this great car, and it's like, yeah, and they've got the payments, and they're living more paycheck to paycheck than you are, who makes a tenth of that. And so part of it, when I guess the part that I just kept thinking about was that it really is how you view it and what you allow society to put on you, as far as what you think about people that may be more or less affluent, as you can see, or in the happy factor, or the, oh, well, as soon as I have that, I'll be happy. And I don't think that's any of us. But looking across, you made the point that God made them both, no matter where we fall on the scale, whether you're rich or poor. God made all of us.
This thing, I didn't really spend a lot of time diving into it, but what do you think that means, God made them both? Does that mean that God made them as the individual, or does that mean that God made one poor and made one rich?
Oh, man, that's a question.
I thought I'd throw that out to some smart people and see if they want to touch it.
Yeah,
well,
that's
then,
podcast
that's Melanie
at Whole Life.
Oh! I thought
that's a great idea. Yeah, there we go.
I was like, that must be a Melanie question. That's that's like answering for God. I have no idea. But I also think that people that didn't get, people think, well, I didn't grow up with money, or I wasn't, like you gave the three instances of three men in your life who really gave you good advice.
Yeah, influenced me. Yeah.
All different. Like they each focused on something different. Like your father-in-law, how to invest, how to learn about buying a house, and being, and your dad, like, come on, man, it's up to you. Work hard, get it done. We don't expect everyone to hand it out. But then another person, the third one, who was like, look, it's okay to, when you need it, it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
And so to me, I feel like the devil uses money. Man, I've seen this so many times where it'll paralyze people into doing nothing. Where it's like, oh man, I can't afford to do this, or I'm doing this, but I don't trust this, or I don't trust you, and then I feel like that just goes back to how we view what God does in all of our lives, whether it's financial or otherwise spiritual. So I think it's the finances are the same thing, although I would say that from my perspective, after spending that long in the financial services industry, where people literally, you have nurses that are like critical care nurses, physicians who don't know how to write a check. I'm like, how did you make it through medical school? And no one taught you how to balance a checkbook? I'm not kidding you how many people don't know how to balance a checkbook, or go online and go, let's just take this month to last month and say how much money came in, how much came out. That's your right. Like,
isn't there an app for that?
There probably is.
There actually is.
Yeah, I'm sure
I use it.
I'm sure there must be, but a simple mathematical, like, I don't understand that. And so I also think we've done a poor job of helping people understand the concept of money and how to like having someone in your life that's going to mentor you to do those things. And I know we have some classes upcoming, but I think God gives us so many tools, but also so many people do not want to talk about money. That, like, I had clients I never ever saw. Everything was over the phone. I don't want to have that. We've kind of been talking about connecting. It is hard to connect when that's the subject matter, because they would just as soon say, I'd like to change my deduction from my paycheck and my, to what's going to my IRA. I want to do this. And they would, if they could do anything online versus having to come and actually have you say, hey, how, have you gotten a raise? Should we be talking about other concepts? Are you at a point where you should be a different? And I think all of those things it's really those perceptions that we have that keep us from talking to even, hey, God gave you like you said, did God make one or the other? Well, God gave you a financial advisor because you work at this job. Like everyone at Advent Health, they've got a financial advisor there. They have a CFP that's available to them. And how many people take advantage of it? I can tell you how many I used to be there. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it.
So Randy, what about these perceptions keeps us from connecting, and what about those perceptions could help us connect? Because you're talking about how people perceive themselves, whether they perceive themselves as rich or poor, whether they perceive others as rich or poor. And we see all these different variables of possibilities that could happen with what people have and why or how they have it. But how does that bring us to the point of figuring out this thing called connection?
Honestly, my honest opinion is I think a lot of it is just rooted in the haves and the have-nots, or the perception of such. Like, I don't feel like if you're not personally, but if we're not in the same tax bracket, and Ken, you touched on your message, like, hey, your neighborhood's a good indicator of, like, you guys might all be in the same tax bracket, right? Because these are what the houses cost, and that's usually a pretty good indication if you haven't gotten yourself in too deep over a house. So you kind of feel like, oh, I might be able to fit in there. And I love what you said, what we do here at Whole Life. Like, we don't care necessarily, not that we don't care, but we would rather know you by your first name than your title. Like, hey, I'm Ken the pastor. I don't need to know that you're a physician, although I hope to find that out. But we start from the premise that we're all just equal. We're all here worshiping together. We're here as a family. We're here on a journey together. But that's the hard part to get past, because the first question we all ask each other, at least for men, Melanie, you can maybe go more about how the women, but what do you do?
I'm not speaking for all women.
Well,
come on, Melanie.
But men, well, it's the first thing. It's like, oh, what do you? I just yesterday,
and I really try to get away from that. And I realize how much I do that, but I'm really trying hard to find another place to start in my conversations with people. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about the things that matter to you. Tell me about just something other than, not because for some people their careers do define them,
sure.
But I don't know that that's always a healthy thing, because careers, when those are what defines us, whether we're doing good at our job or not, defines whether we're a good person or a worthwhile or have worth. And sometimes, as much as we like to think we have control over how well we're doing at our work, we don't have as much control as maybe you would like to admit. Yeah. Because the fact of the matter is that, the people that work around me have a little bit of control over how I'm doing. The people that work, who supervise me have some control over how I'm doing. And so, anyway, where I'm running with this is I really love the idea of seeing people for who they are as a person, and not just, and sometimes your job is a part of your identity, a part of who you are. But I think we've maybe in our American culture made it an outsized, because in some cultures, the first thing you ask them is what's your name? What's your last name? Because that'll tell you, like, for instance, when we lived on Guam, what your last name would tell me a lot about who you were probably and what was going on. If you had certain names, it meant you were part of this family that was a very important family in the island. And that would kind of give you a sense of that person. And so anyway, different in American culture, we tend to put a lot more emphasis on what a person does. And it's an interesting thing that if somebody does a job, certain jobs, it isn't always about the amount of money that job makes. Sometimes that's part of the socioeconomic part of it, is that there's high status jobs and low status jobs, and it's not, a lot of times it's tied to money, but a lot of times it's not, and that's one of the things I mentioned with blue collar versus white collar jobs.
Right. Well, especially the trades now. And I think that's a change that's been more positive is, now it's like, it's hard to find people that, want to go and say, well, maybe college isn't for me. I'm going to go to the trades. I'm going to become a plumber or an electrician who make solid
very
money.
Comfortable living.
Right. And great benefits and all of that. Whereas like I graduated high school in 1990 and back then it was like, if you're not going to college, you're a bum. Yep. Like everyone's going to college and that's the thing to do. And I feel like we're moving away from that a little bit, but like if I get on an airplane and I sit next to somebody and they want to strike up a conversation, I know the first question that they're going to ask is, what do you do? Because it sets the tone for what then if you say, I work for a church, and it's like, oh, really? Well, what do you do at a church? Or I'm a, whatever. Or if you say I'm a pastor, so many things I think are immediately set in place. And then for some people that might make them feel uncomfortable that, oh, you work for a church? Well, you don't make any money. Which,
or you make a whole lot of money depending on which church you work for. But I think what we're talking about though are social scripts. Sure. Because we absorb and we learn what our social scripts are. And so, for example, if you meet someone, like if I meet a man, or I meet a woman, or I meet a child, or I meet an elder person, or I meet someone who's non-binary, there are all these different social scripts that you have in your head of how you are going to interact with this person based on who you perceive them to be. And we have those same social scripts when it comes to money because of the power factor that's often involved with money. Oh, this person makes a lot of money, so I'm not going to talk about this or this or this. You have a social script in your head that you will use when you engage with that person. And one of the things that I think is important at whole life is learning how to rewrite those social scripts so that we're engaging with each other on an equal human level instead of the prescribed social scripts that we've inherited from society or from family or from whatever.
From whatever, yeah.
Have you ever had a conversation with somebody before you knew who they were, and then after you found out who they were, it changed the way you talk to them? I'll give you, for example.
Okay, go for it.
I was on back in the 90s, I was on a flight from Charlotte to LA, and I got on the flight. I had the whole row to myself, and they were getting ready to close the doors, and I was so excited because you know how it is on those cross-country flights where you can just lay down, and if you have all this, which rarely happens, right? And I was so excited. And last minute, this
last guy in the door,
this lady comes running on the flight. She's wearing this long flowy dress, this big floppy hat and sunglasses. And as soon as she walked on, I knew where she was coming. I knew where she was coming. She comes to my seat and she's like, "Hey, I think I've got the window." I'm like, "Yeah, that's great."
So of course you do.
So glad you do. And so she sits down. She's just the absolute nicest person that we're getting ready to, "Hey, would you like, I've got some gum. You want some gum?" "Yeah, sure. I'll take some gum." And then this is back when they were still serving meals on flights, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, I know which one. We're always good." But we both had ordered a vegetarian meal, so we're like talking away about this, and she's really nice. I'm having a great conversation with her, and we're talking about why I'm vegetarian, why she's vegetarian. I get into, that being vegetarian is part of, some religious beliefs and things that I have going on. And she's like, well, I do it because of animal rights. I haven't found religion to be particularly friendly towards, some of the activism that I think is important. And so I talk about how I met Jesus. I have this whole long conversation with her. I suddenly realized she hasn't told me much about herself. So what do you do for a living? And to which she says, "Oh, well, I work in kind of the entertainment industry." And,
that was
and
my
so
first guess.
I start I was like, "Oh yeah, like what do you do?" And she's like, "Well, I'm an actress." So now I'm trying.
Anything I've
so
seen
I'm
you
like,
in?
well, no. So I'm like, now I'm thinking like local theater, right? I'm like, what she do? Like local theater, local commercials. So like, oh, well, like what kind of acting mainly? She goes, mostly television. So now I'm thinking, oh, are you the person with Tidy Bowl? What commercial have I seen you in?
Tidy Bowl.
Because I'm still so
Woman
stupid.
number 3 in coffee shop.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so and so I said, so anything I may have seen you in? And she looks at me like I am the dumbest man to ever live. And I mean, it was more a pitying look than like mean or anything, but she looks at me like, who are you?
Who's this guy?
And she goes, well, have you ever watched Baywatch?
No.
And as soon as she said that, I knew exactly who she was, and it completely changed the conversation for the rest of the
So who was it?
It was Alexandra Paul, who is Lieutenant Stephanie on the
she's
show,
awesome.
and David Hasselhoff's girlfriend on the show, right? So, yeah. So...
Yeah.
Anyway, so
That's awesome.
so she couldn't have been nicer. Just Alexandra, if you're listening to this,
That's right.
thank you for that flight. You made my 20-year-old life just so much better. But I was on a flight. Yeah, I was actually flying over to New Zealand to be a youth pastor, and that got me a year's full of illustrations and cred with all the teen boys. Those that you.
Oh my goodness gracious. We have devolved.
But see how it changes though?
No,
like
for
it
sure.
just immediately changed. And I went from having just a normal conversation with another human being to being like,
Yeah.
you're the, and I have to think that for people in that situation, that I think that if you are on a certain part of the socioeconomic strata, it's very nice to be viewed as a human being as opposed to, oh, you're an actor. Oh, I have this much money or whatever. And I think the same is true in a different part of the socioeconomic strata where it's nice to be looked at and being like, well, you have stuff that, you're smart. You have things that's worth hearing. It doesn't matter that you're over on this end.
Yeah.
Your opinion is just as important. But too many times, as soon as we know that somebody does this for a living or makes this amount of money or makes not that amount of money or whatever, we start talking to them differently. We start giving more or less value to them than we would have just given them if just on the merit of sitting next to them in a plane seat and just having a regular conversation with a person. And I think that that's also can be what keeps us from making the connection in the first place is, Alexandra Paul would never be interested in, pimply-faced 20-year-old Ken as having a conversation with Ken. But Alexandra Paul was interested in the conversation. She was very nice about it. She shared some things about herself. She shared some things that were going on, and it was really interesting to have that conversation with her. And in some ways, I wish maybe I'd never really even realized it. That's not true. But the thing was, we oftentimes either don't take the opportunity to connect with somebody because we assume that they aren't interested in us, or we assume that we wouldn't be interested in them, that they don't have anything really to offer in the way of something that we might be interested in or the conversation. And so, I think that is one of the things that we hope at Whole Life to do, is to say, look, every single person at this church has immense value, every single person. And every single person has something that can add to your life, that can bring something beautiful into your life. And sometimes it takes a little bit of seeking to figure out what that is. But there really is something that every single person can really teach you, and that can be an opportunity for you to grow. And the fact of the matter is that each one of us has ways that we can help another person, no matter where they are on that socioeconomic,
on the
scale of things. And so, and I think that sometimes, like I said, we get in our own head and think, oh, that person would never.
Right.
It's one of the things that I hear as a pastor so often. Oh, I just didn't want to bother you because I know you're so busy. And I appreciate the thought.
But also.
Sometimes there are times where I wish that the person would have bothered me because it wasn't going to be a bother. I wish that they would have texted me and said, hey, I'm in the hospital. Well, if I can't come visit, I'll be honest with you about that. But maybe I just drove past the hospital you were in, and it would have been an easy thing for me to drop by, or for me to make sure that there was somebody at the church that could drop by and see you. And that's just one example. But there's so many times where I just think we really sell short the connections that are available to us, and we do it because, and it's not just the money. It's also, like I just said, Seventh-day Adventist pastors are, fairly middle class in the socioeconomic scale of things, but will also be put over here as, oh, you're the pastor, and I shouldn't talk about this around you. I should go ahead and we don't, or I don't want to, oh man, what would Ken think if
I said,
if he came into my house, and and so again, we sometimes miss out on the opportunities that are there for us with people that we just write off as that person would never be interested in me, or I'm a little bit afraid to have a conversation, or sometimes, if we're really honest, or that person's beneath me, that they don't really, there's nothing there. And that's really what I hope to kind of get through this sermon, is not about whether it's better to be rich, poor, middle class, not about, any of those things, but the worth of a human being, that every human being has worth. And we're not going to have deep connections with every person we run into.
Yeah.
But we should not walk away from the opportunity to connect with people simply because they may be in a different place socioeconomically than we are.
Go ahead.
So it seems to me that there are practical questions that arise from that, though, because there is, okay, we have the opportunity for connection, and we understand that there's possibility for connection. But I think that there are other pieces of it, pieces of awareness that can hinder or enhance those connections. For example, you talked about someone that that people regularly ask for money. Mm-hmm. And that's a really uncomfortable thing for that person who has a lot of money, but who also gives away a lot of money, and people don't know what's happening, right?
Right.
And then there are other people who are just so unbelievably oblivious to what they have and the fact that other people don't have it, mm-hmm. that they end up alienating other people inadvertently by the way that they talk. I knew somebody that, I don't know if I can tell this. I probably can. It's anonymous enough. I knew someone that was having a new house built, and this person posted something on social media about how stressful it was trying to figure out how they were going to design each one of these, 12 bathrooms or something they had in their house. And, can anyone help? Like this, it was just this burden that was on this person's soul. And I thought, oh my goodness, do you have any idea what that sounds like to other people, who may be reading it, who are just thankful they have a bathroom, in their house. So I think having an awareness of what the way that we come across to people and how that makes other people feel.
Can I Can we unpack that a little bit further, though? Do you think that was a real burden for that person?
Not from where I was sitting.
Oh, but that's the interesting part to me. Not from where I'm sitting, because I'm going to guess for that person that was a genuine burden in their life, and maybe they were flexing. That could be, the person, I don't. But I do think that sometimes where we really run into some connection issues with people is that people have first world problems that are still first world. It's still a problem for them. It's something that's and we are like, we roll our eyes at them. It's like, well, would that all my problems were yours? Because I wish you would know what this is like. And I think that from that side of things, I think sometimes. I think we need to. I think to the point is that we need to be careful what we're putting out there, because sometimes it can look like flexing, even if that's not the way that we mean it to appear. But I think that on the flip side of things, sometimes we can be a little bit more willing to not feel jealous and to say, that's a problem for you. I'm sorry you're feeling that kind of. This is such a burden for you. Does that make sense? Or you? Well, Melanie's like not buying any of this.
Well, I will say this: some of the clients that I have had that have had money, and again, like Melanie, you touched on this just a moment ago, that we don't know like what their philanthropy is,
right?
And so, someone that may have putting in 12 bathrooms, that might be the one-room apartment with a half bath, shower in the sink kind of thing, to them in the money that they have. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't still have a bad optic from the lower, maybe people below them. But one thing that someone with wealth taught me a long time ago was two things. Never steal the joy from somebody who's giving you a gift. So if I have something and I want to give it to you, just say thank you. Don't try to steal their joy and be like, oh, I don't need your help, or I don't need this, or you don't have to do that. Just say, wow, that is amazing. Thank you. Like that's one of the biggest things that people that do have, they do realize that, and they're a giving soul. They just want you to be happy. That's why they're offering it to you. Don't go with strings attached. Even if you knew there were strings attached, just say thank you. And the other part I think is that not finding, I just feel like so much of it is just rooted in, especially with social media now, that everyone puts out their best life, living our best life, doing all these things. And I just know from a handful of people that have let me kind of into their world, helping them with their finances and through some retirement planning, different things, that while it could be perceived as a bad optic from somebody who has less, the other part is I've just learned to cheer for everybody. I want the person that doesn't have the savvy to do what they need to do. They weren't taught that. I want them to find that and to be able to not have to have such a worry about I don't know what to do, because that's a helpless feeling. It's another helpless feeling when you feel like I've done everything I know how to do and I'm still not getting it done. That's a helpless feeling. But also for so many people that when we look at it and go, yeah, they have so much more than me, you'd be surprised on how little they actually live on. Yeah, they made a great decision and they had the money to do like great real estate in that. I bought a house with 12 bathrooms in it. I don't use but one of them, but I bought it because it's a really good investment property. And and I'm just telling you, the people that I know that have real money that I've dealt with professionally, most of them live on a lot less than what most people assume they do. And the people that flash it are usually broke. See, and that's just a hard and fast rule.
So we have shifted the responsibility to the perceiver. And what I was trying to talk about was a self-awareness.
No, I understand
of how you project yourself. How they perceive you is another conversation, I think. But how you project yourself and having an awareness of how you come across is an important thing. I don't think it can be offset by saying, well, you know what, I've got 12 bathrooms and I'm going to talk about my 12 bathrooms with someone who, is living in a tent trailer. I think there is a responsibility of self-awareness to be able to say, hey, you know what, this is how I come across.
But I think I totally agree with that 100%.
But I don't think that's a direct conversation that they're having either. I mean, who are they talking to?
I think that's one thing that if you're, and that's the and I think we're hitting right on the issue with the socioeconomic connection, is that and this is the reason why people stay separate. This is why they stay within their tax brackets, because the fact of the matter is that if I bought a house with 12 bathrooms, don't I have a right to be excited about that? Don't I want to talk to my friends about, the fact that I'm trying to figure out how to decorate them? Well, I do. And just as much as the person who bought a house with one bathroom wants to talk to their friends about it. And I know how frustrating that feeling is for the person who's living in a tent, for sure, but that gets exactly to what keeps us from making connection, is that it's just easier to not, I'm just going to stay with the people who get me as opposed to going with the people who don't.
Right, but you are not going to walk out of a fancy restaurant and tell a homeless person how much you just enjoyed your meal, right?
Probably not, no.
Right. So all I'm saying is you might text a friend of yours who is also a, connoisseur of amazing restaurants and say, hey, this is a great restaurant that I ate at and it was amazing. But you're not going to use that language with someone that is hungry and doesn't have any resources.
But I would hope that you would also, that's assuming though that you're not going to help that person.
Right. But that's, again, that's another part of the conversation, right?
To me, they're the same in that if you're, and this is something that I did at one point in my life too, before being exposed to just so many people that are so generous, that I assumed before getting to know them that, oh, well, I don't know why they're complaining. They're complaining about how much they pay in taxes. Well, isn't that a great problem to have when you pay more in taxes than I make in 2 years? So why are you complaining? But instead of that attitude on my part, and to say, because then I rob them of, man, I didn't know that they work 70, 80 hours a week, and that they've got whatever they've put themselves together to be in this position to make the money, and how much money that they give. They're way more giving than I've ever been. So all I'm saying is that we again, the label goes on really, really easy, but at the same time, I would also, like, if I'm leaving that restaurant and that homeless person's there, I would be like, man, that food was legit. Do you need something to eat? Would you like to do that? Would you like to go and have a seat?
Well, and to Melanie's point, I totally understand what you're saying.
I'm not
I
totally
get what you're saying about, being thoughtful about the comments and who you're making them to, because it is very difficult, to hear about a lifestyle that you'd like to have, or that maybe not even that you'd like to have it. You're like, wow, that's wow. Okay. And I can go back to, with it, but that's where, because I wouldn't say that to the homeless person that's seen on this side of the road, but what about my mom and dad, or my brother or sister who I am close to, who maybe is in a different economic bracket than I am. And that's the part that I guess I worry about a little bit. I don't know that I have the answer for it, but there's a part of me that thinks that, when I go eat at a really nice restaurant and my sibling, parent, aunt, niece, whatever, that I'm very close to and that I have conversations with, do I never say that, this restaurant was good, or do I say, hey, I went to this amazing restaurant, I'd love to take you there sometime? Well, it gets complicated, because I know with that person, if we go, I'm going to need to pay for it. That's what needs to happen. Now, how's that going to make them feel when I'm like, no, I'll pick up the check. And that's the part that I think it really comes down to when it comes to this communication and when it comes to connecting in different socioeconomic places on that strata there, is that there has to be an assumption of good intent, and there has to be a awareness on both parts, and there has to be communication. I do have, and I do have family that are in a much different tax bracket than I am, and they're making more. And we've had to have conversations with them about family vacation options and things. It's like, yeah, that would be fun to go do. And I know that you can do it. And the family have been like, well, we'll pay for it. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But you know how that makes me feel, that every time we go somewhere, you're picking up the check. It makes me feel like I want to do my part too.
Yeah.
And so it's an awkward conversation to have. And yet when you love somebody, they've let me know, Ken, it kind of hurts that you're not willing to let me do what I'd like to be able to do, because I can afford it. It doesn't hurt me. And I promise you, I won't do anything that's going to be hurtful to me. But it's still been an awkward, and it still makes me feel a little bit like, oh man, when I want to do certain things and they want to do certain things, but that's where, to me, that communication becomes so vital, and the honesty. And I've told my family member, hey, it makes me feel this way when this happens. And my family member said, and it makes me feel this way when you say this, and it makes me feel that. And it's this conversation that has to take place. And I am so grateful for this family member that we've been able to have those conversations, and it makes it easier because we are family, so we're not going anywhere. If it was more on a friendship level, it would probably be more difficult to have that kind of conversation. And yet that's what I'm trying to say is in this sermon is we're part of the family of God. We're all family together. And so these conversations can be really awkward to have, and they can be very difficult to have. And yet sometimes it's important for us to say, hey, when you're talking about your 12 bathrooms, right now I'm struggling to stay in the one bathroom in the house that I'm in, and I'm really trying to be happy for you in the problem that you're facing. And again, this isn't a conversation you're going to have with the person you just met.
Yeah, no.
But in a relationship that you've developed and started off on, that you're somewhere, it would be great if in the family of God we could get to a place where we could have kind conversations that aren't easy conversations, kind of going back to the Crucial Conversations book that, is talked about a lot, but just having these conversations with people and saying, hey, having a relationship with you is really important to me. And to keep our relationship open and going, there's some things we probably need to talk about a little bit here.
Well, when you add the family dynamic to it, now you're throwing in that's the whole 9 yards then, because not only is it uncomfortable, but also when it may not be just that you make more money than me, you don't agree with my professional choices, how I've chosen to raise my family, and you may think that I don't care about my kids as much as you do because my kids don't have what your kids have, or you choose different ways that you live your life, and knowing that there are financial. And like, well, you brought this on yourself because this is is how you do things. So I get that part too. And for me, the only way that it really works, this is just me personally, is I want to help if someone's sitting outside the restaurant. We actually just almost got thrown out of a Waffle House for buying somebody breakfast in Daytona because he had some problems and he was drunk, and we brought him in and put him at our table, and my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, because they won't let them come in the restaurant. And so they were going to, I'm like, look, I will take the food out to do this, right? Like in that scenario, like I want everyone to win. And I just, man, I cheer when people do well because I'm excited that you're doing well. And whether that means you have, but I'm also pretty basic. I'm just like, hey, this is what choices I've made. And if I wanted to, if I wanted to make more money, I could. And if I wanted to choose a different lifestyle, I could. And I also know that there are people who are just stuck where they're at because that's what they've been exposed to. And that's also though, like that was the only rewarding part about being a financial advisor were for people that didn't have because you were perfect. Like you had three strong male counterparts to you that were like, look, we want to speak into your life. We want to help you understand and give you all the tools you need. Then what you do with them is up to you. And so many people haven't had it in, whether they're a male or female, they haven't had anyone to speak into their life about that. So that was always the part when I could educate somebody about how to do money. It was like, wow, this is really, really cool. But yeah, I don't know that there's a super strong
I think there was,
way to come through.
There's something that you said, Ken, about the engagement that you have with people in terms of, vacations, what you can do, what they can do. And then I think we're getting into a little bit of the nitty gritty practical side. And there's a decision that's made that I want to be in a relationship with you. And now we're negotiating the terms of that relationship. We're negotiating our boundaries. We're negotiating what it takes to maintain this relationship and work through this relationship so that we can continue this relationship. And I think that when it comes to our engagement with people who are in a different place on the socioeconomic scale, I don't want to, I should say spectrum instead of scale, because when we talk about up, above, and lower, and those sorts of things, and that moves away from the equality language we want to use. But when we make a decision that we want to engage with someone and they want to engage with us, which I think is what we're trying to have happen at Whole Life, then we enter into that piece where it's a back and forth, and it's figuring out how we're going to maintain the relationship.
No, perfect. I think that
I love it.
Summarizes it well.
Wow, this did. We are farther in than normal before getting to the questions this week. Who could see?
Apparently, money is a big topic.
Like, who could have seen that one coming anyway? Hey, I recommended a book once, a long time ago. So that's all I'm just saying. Okay, Deanna asked, "How do we communicate curiosity in a way that is not perceived as patronizing?" So if I'm asking, maybe it's the question you're asking. I mean, most people probably aren't comfortable like, well, hey, how much money do you make? Because I make a bunch. I mean, that would obviously be some way for it to be patronizing. But so what? I'm thinking the question and a curiosity about socioeconomic status? What are we talking about?
And what level of intrusiveness too, I think. And it depends on where you are in the relationship. If you're very close to someone, you can ask different kinds of questions than with someone that you're not as close to. So that's kind of a wide open thing.
So I like the question though. I think that it is easy at times to be patronizing in our conversations with others. And so I think that probably the first thing for us to think about is, why am I asking this question? Am I asking it to genuinely know this person because I genuinely care? And if I am doing that, is it a question that if I were in their shoes, I'd want to receive? That's a place to start. And since I'm not in their shoes, could this question be interpreted differently than the way I mean it to be? Or can this conversation be interpreted in a different way? And so maybe putting a little bit of time and thought into the way that we go about doing things, and maybe also giving permission to the other person to let us know if we're being offensive or if we're saying something that kind of hurts or rubs the wrong way. that's something that I try to do in the relationships that I think that there could be some difficulty is, hey, if I'm hurting your feelings at any point, please let me know. I know we come from very different places, and so I don't know what it's like to be you, and I'm suspecting you may not know what it's like to be me. And so I'd love to have a relationship of reciprocal respect where if I'm hurting your feelings, you'll tell me. And if you're hurting my feelings, I'll share that with you as well. And that, by the way, it is, your feelings can get hurt on either side.
On either way, yeah.
Either way, you can. And so just speaking into that and saying, look, this may be, because we're coming from different places, this may be a difficult conversation and relationship to have, but it's one that I value and I want to have.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to need to know if I say something that offends you or hurts your feelings, I'd really like for you to speak to it. And what I'm going to pledge is if you do that, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to not argue with you. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. And I wonder if you would do the same thing for me, that if you say something, I could speak to it and say, hey, that hurt my feelings, or that, wow, did you mean this to sound this way? Because this is what I heard you say.
Yeah.
It felt like, or, when you talk about this stuff, what I hear, I'm living this way, you're living that way, and I'm hearing that it feels like you think that kind of makes you superior or something, or it makes me feel pretty small. But having that open commitment, that's one of the ways that we can avoid patronizing people, because I think that people genuinely don't mean to sometimes to be patronizing. They don't mean that, but that's the way it comes across.
Yeah.
And so giving somebody the permission to say that goes a long way, because there's a lot of times in people I've thought, man, it's really offensive, but I don't want to say anything because they'll get mad. Then I'll lose the friendship altogether. Yeah. And I'm just going to go ahead and take the take the high road and not, deal with it. But that's actually pretty unhealthy in relationships, to not be able to speak into it. And there's, depending on where you're at in the relationship, there's a certain amount of vulnerability or less vulnerability that you're going to have. So you have to weigh all those factors out. But I think it's a good question. And I think the question we ought, people like me are not particularly great because we speak without putting as much thought into it. But sometimes when you're going into a tricky situation, or one where there's a high likelihood of miscommunication, it's really worth it to think about what you're going to say.
And even like you said, preface it with if we're going to talk about money, we both need to realize that there's landmines everywhere. Yeah. That, like all the things you just said, like if you're upset or I say something that doesn't seem, is not comfortable with you, let's just realize that we're both heading in there.
And this works on all the difficult subjects, whether it's race, culture,
I was just going to say
money, all those things. It's just worth saying, hey, we both may be looking at this. We may be looking at the same picture, but we may be looking at it from very different angles, which means that we're going to see things differently, which doesn't make the picture different. It just means the angle we see it makes us see it different.
Yeah.
So let's be open to that. Let's be willing to have the humility to say that I might be wrong, or I might not be seen, or I'm not wrong, but I'm just not seeing it from your angle.
Yeah, maybe that comes with time too. I resonated as we start to wrap it up here. We got a few questions and comments, but I really resonated when you said my mom was out canvassing the city.
Oh yeah,
because for us it was my mom had been on the recovery floor as a nurse for years, and she got a promotion. She went and she was the assistant director of rehab at the largest hospital in Green Bay. And her boss had boys like 3 years older, 2 years older than us. So we would get all of their clothes. The good part was nobody, like none of our tribe knew it.
Right.
Because they weren't friends with that group. So we were just like, oh man, where'd you get that cool T-shirt? Where'd you get the? And they like had all like we were wearing tough skins, which you can get your butt kicked on the with your on the bus with all the kids that went to the local high school that we rode with. But then when it's like, hey man, we got some Levi's coming in the door. Yeah, I don't care if there's a patch on those or not. You automatically went up a notch, right? So I totally resonated. And T. Cinco said, I love this. I was known as the garage sale queen when my kids were little, and we were living living on one pastor's salary. The sad truth is, even getting hand-me-downs or shopping at yard sales is a privilege many people don't have.
Yeah.
My life has been incredibly blessed by people on both ends of the socioeconomic scale. I wonder if sometimes we miss those blessings because we presume we have nothing to gain from people different than us. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated, T-Cinco, you're the best, and we all know it, so let's just admit it. Mimitzo said, I can be sitting next to a surgeon or someone from our unsheltered community, and I have amazing conversations with both, speaking of our whole life community.
Yep.
And when Family Promise is our guest, it is so amazing to see their kids, my kids, and kids from volunteers of all socioeconomic levels just playing together. There's no difference. And all the parents and volunteers can learn from each other. And I think they followed that up asking, said, young children seem to naturally coexist with others without prejudice. How can we teach them to keep this kind of inclusion if they go to a school with only others in their same economic station as themselves?
Yeah, I think this is a question that was asked to me during first, and it was a super good one. And my suggestion is that if you have kids, you intentionally find ways to put them around kids on a lot of different places on that socioeconomic continuum. That's what will do it when you expose them and people start. Yeah, people are people, and that will really do it.
And by example, too, because, they're describing a situation where they're spending time with the people, Family Promise and the volunteers. And if your kids see you spending time with lots of different people, then that tells them that they can spend time with lots of different people, too.
Yeah. And this one hit home in a way that just in different places in my life and other people that I'm close to, I've heard this before, and so I just wanted to get your take on this. This one came from someone who said, there are many that live in fancy large houses, 12 bathrooms, that I would never feel comfortable having in my home. How do I connect with people that get me? I don't want to be looked down on for how I live.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple of comments that came in afterwards, and just that I would say that, don't assume what somebody else might think or not think, but it's also hard when if you've been to someone else's house and you're like, wow, they've got a great house. And then you're like, well, here's my little house over here. We cleaned before you came, but it's not fancy. And I know that that's I don't care what, you can invite me over to your house if it's a mess or it's clean or it's big or it's small. And I am going to be super excited. I love to get invited to someone's home. I'll just be honest. I love it. Like, hey, want to come and play games? Hey, you want to come over for lunch? Hey, we'd love to just, sit outside by the fire pit and, hang out. So I would say that I would hope that, and speaking just here, I would hope someone wouldn't look down on you just because your house is smaller or, in for that reason alone. But I also realize it's a little bit, it can be uncomfortable if you kind of feel like, ooh, I don't really know this person. So maybe the ticket before you invite or allow yourself to be invited maybe is to have a few more of those other conversations that are a little more, like Ken said, they might be a little more risky or a little more dangerous, but
and ideally that doesn't matter. But you know what? It doesn't have to be at somebody's house either. Let's meet for a picnic in the park. Let's go for a walk by the river. There are lots of things that you can do that that don't involve necessarily having someone into your space.
What if you have a really great time doing that?
Yeah.
Right? Because then if you're in a neutral spot, that kind of takes a little bit of the edge off. Like, wow, this person is just like normal or just like me without any of the other things to go along.
I think that I know exactly that feeling, though, of thinking, oh, man, and I also know the feeling of having people that I genuinely care about that won't have me over because they're somehow embarrassed, because they are embarrassed. They're like, well, and logistically, I understand that. Like sometimes it's just uncomfortable, and it's like, well, I only have, I only have a certain amount of silverware and it's not going to be enough to accommodate everybody that's coming over or whatever. That stuff, that can be difficult. But one of the things I know is that I think that the funny thing is that for me, I would hate to think that any of my friends wanted to have me, would like to have me at their house, but they're embarrassed because it's not enough for what they think I would need. Because if you're somebody I care about and you want me at your home, man, I'm honored to be there. And yet I also know what it feels like to not want to have somebody over to my house because I'm like, oh my word, this is like, this is my house fits in your foyer. I mean, what do I, what do I do here? And so I understand that. And it's one of the things that Rashawn and I have tried to work on a little bit in our life is just be like, you know what, just because the house is not, that doesn't mean that person doesn't value coming over and having a meal with me and doesn't, because ostensibly they're coming not because of my house, but because of me. But to Melanie's point, there are so many pastors. It used to be that when I began pastoral ministry and long before that, it was a big deal that as pastors, you went and visited people in their homes. That was a really big deal. And, I knew pastors that would like try to map a schedule of how they're going to hit every church member's house in a year. And that works when you're in a small or medium church, a little harder when you've got 1,200 members. That's,
how many is that a day, Ken?
I can tell you it doesn't work real well. But the point is, one of the things I've discovered is that people will meet you at McDonald's for a milkshake, or they'll, and that's one of the reasons why I've been really grateful to the way that Whole Life does things. Because when I'm wanting to get to know people, one of the first things I'll say, hey, let's go grab a meal. Let's go do some, grab that. I'm going to treat my treat. So it doesn't matter where I think you are on the socioeconomic, I'm happy for it to be my treat. And that way it takes the pressure off.
First time we hung out,
Ken
paid and I got to pick where we ate.
Yeah. And
same here.
Yeah, we ate at Jimmy Hula's in Altamont,
and it but you know what?
We ate at Chewy's in Nashville.
Ooh, Chewy's sounds
Is
good.
That where really? That's what we did.
It was Chewy's
that's
in
right.
Nashville.
That's right. Yeah. So, and I'm a big believer that food brings people together in a spiritual way. Don't ask me why, but you just see it throughout the Bible that when people eat together, it creates connection and bonding.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's one of the reasons I like to do that. And, but find what is comfortable for you. Maybe it's, a Saturday afternoon walk at a park. No cost, just show up. Everybody walks at the park. Maybe it's, maybe you have tennis courts near where you live that you have privileges to get in. So, that other person likes playing. Just say that, this is something that Tim, that Melanie's husband and I would do together. Is that Tim? Think at the time. I'm trying to remember if he had. One of us had tennis courts, but anyway, the point is that we started playing tennis together. It was just a commonality that we have, and. It was something that we both enjoy, and we found some public courts that worked for us, and that's what we started doing. But there was also a time Tim enjoys some indoor tennis, and I remember him saying, "Hey, let's go do this." And I don't know if he had a membership or something. He took me to do that, and it was fun. We had a good time doing that. But the point is, just find something that works for you.
Yeah.
And don't assume that the other person doesn't want to have a connection. And some people will let you know that they don't want to make the connection. They just will. And what I tell you on that is, if they don't want to make the connection, no amount of forcing will make it happen.
Those aren't your people.
And we're sorry we're really sorry if that happens to you repeatedly from people here at the church. But that would be one of the things I'd urge you, as many of you are listening who are a part of the Whole Life family, is be aware of the people that are trying to make a connection with you. And I'm not saying that you have to be friends with everybody who wants to be friends with you. what I am saying is give them the dignity of being human about things and being,
What's the ground rules at staff? What's the intent? We're going to assume good intention.
Good intent.
Yeah, like that goes so far, and just even because it doesn't cost you anything to walk away, even if, like you said, they don't want to be your friend. Just assume there's a reason you don't understand, and just think the best. That is hard to do. I'm not trivializing that, but also, like, that's one of the things I think in my personal growth that's been the most rewarding is to not assume that even if I have pretty good idea that someone is just like, well, that jerk, I don't want to be his friend, or, whatever the situation, just be like, look, it didn't work out. I don't know why. And just let it be. And maybe there's room for that to grow later.
Yeah.
And
I think that works until you've tried about everybody around you and you're still not making any connections and you feel really frustrated about that. And again, I've been in those communities where that happened, where I felt like I went through everybody, or a family member of mine felt like they'd tried everybody and there was just nobody interested in making a connection or being friends or whatever. And it was one of the hard things of learning in life, was that at that point we had to figure out a new community.
Yeah.
Because once I've been through the list twice,
you can't.
And, I'm not going to be able to make anybody be friends with me. So if that's the case, I need to find a community where hopefully I can find that. And, like I said, I hope my dream is that Whole Life is the place where everybody can find somebody that they can connect with, and that can kind of become their small community that is a part of the larger community. Realistically speaking, man, I've just talked to a couple people who are struggling.
Yeah.
And I keep praying about it and praying that right thing comes along. And, that's one of the things, is that there's people that you want to be friends with, but their Lego block is already full.
Yeah.
And it's not that they hate you. It's just that they're not, it's just, there's only so much space and that's one of the things to also keep in mind for those of us in that analogy is, is there enough space on your Lego block, or are you genuinely out of space? Are you open to making new friends, or you genuinely don't have the space or the room to do it? Because I think there is a time where you legitimately don't have space, but I think there's often times where there's maybe a little bit more margin than we are willing to admit. And so,
especially here in Central Florida, a lot of people move on, not because of whatever, jobs take them different places. With the hospital being here, there's a lot of turnover in who you can see, but sometimes it's when it's those legacy people who are like, man, it would be cool if I could be friends with them. They're like, man, I have got 2 Lego blocks, and they are jammed to the
What's so cool though is we started this whole conversation about how all of these new people are coming into Whole Life and how we're going to need more seats. And I think that's, this is not a stagnant pond that we have here. We have new people coming in all the time, and that means new opportunities for new relationships.
I like that. Yep. Keep your eyes open and your ears open.
Communicate. Mm-hmm. And communicate with an open heart. This is what I need out of a relationship. This is what I'm looking for. Because sometimes people don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hey, I'd like a friendship where I could be coming over to your house once a week and playing games and hanging out. And then there's other people who's like, hey, if I ran into you and we did something once every 3 months, that would be plenty. That would be awesome. That would be great.
And those are sometimes some of the best friends, because you don't see them, and after a while you're like, wow, those are kind of your forever friends.
Super low maintenance friends.
Yeah, sometimes you need some of those too.
But it's also really nice to just have those friends that, it doesn't matter what condition your house is in, they drop in, you're like, hey, family, welcome.
I just drove over to Melanie's one day and just went in the garage. The door was open. I just went in and just, left some stuff, left some goodies for her, just because I felt like, hey,
I just want you to know that I'm going to be leaving my garage door open. And if the garage was cleaned out and whatever else when I came back, that'd be okay.
Awesome. If you would just sweep on the way out, is all I'm asking.
You don't even have to sweep if you just organize.
The funny thing was, after he left, I called him and asked him to come back. Shut my garage door.
Why was the door open?
Gone.
I was like, oh, I thought you were there. I just didn't want to disturb. So I just was like, sneak in. And when I took a picture, like, hey, there's some treats for you in the garage. And it was like, Why is my garage door open? How'd you get in?
Am I the only person who like turns around at least once a month to go back to their house to see if they closed the garage door because they get 3 minutes down the road and you're like, because that's like one of my nightmares, leaving that garage door open.
And I had to unplug mine because every time my neighbor comes home, he opens and closes it.
Yeah, she's like, find a ladder. It's over in the corner. That was, you guys hadn't even moved in yet. And can you just climb up on the ladder and pull the cord out of the ceiling so they don't come in?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever thanked you for that properly.
No.
So thank you, Randy, for doing that.
It was a beautiful night to be on the Harley is all I'm going to say. So it was just a little few extra miles that were just perfect. So no, I really hope people find those because life is so much better when you have some friends that will, you get the invite out of the blue and I'm just one of those people that enjoys like, who's knocking on my front door? Oh, we were in the neighborhood. You guys want to go grab something to eat or, whatever. Oh, hey, we were just sitting down. I can't tell you, like, we're just sitting down to eat. We got more. You want to come in?
You're so funny, Randy. It's so funny how our personalities are different. I am not that person. If you're in the neighborhood and you knock on my door,
anxiety takes over. All right, note to self: Randy's writing down. Do not stop at Ken's unannounced.
Ken will be crawling across the floor with the lights.
If the garage door is open,
I can see Ken doing the military crawl over to the bedroom.
I've seen Ken do that.
Go back, Rochelle. Go back. Don't come out.
Oh, don't worry. She's hiding under the bed with me.
We'll text first, Ken. We'll text first.
Well, I hope that today we've at least, we've gone through a ton of different scenarios, and I don't think there's a one size fits all for anything. But no. I do also hope that like Melanie just said, we have a lot of people come every week, and you see new faces all the time, and sometimes that's hard, especially if you've been through, a handful already or more that you're like, man, I'm just not making a connection. But also, if you're not making a connection, if you see me in the lobby, stop and say hello. If you're a coffee drinker, come on up to my office. I'll make you a nice, really good cup of coffee, and we'll talk and we'll hang out. And I love to meet new people. That's part of not just my comfort zone. That's just part of who I am. And so, stop by and say hello. And maybe I know someone that you don't know that could also be a connection. We can help each other that way.
Cool.
So that's cool. Next week, are we heavy again, or are we gonna?
I don't know. It's up to Freud.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
Freud is speaking next week.
Freud's talking about connecting across culture. And so I don't know. I really wanted to do it, but, I also wanted to go hang out with my son this weekend. So he's...
And also, I this doesn't happen very often, Ken, but he's more qualified than you are to speak.
Oh, it happens all the time. I just monopolize the pulpit anyway. There's plenty of people who are more qualified on almost everything I talk about.
Freud has all the cultural experience.
He does.
Yeah, born in Brazil, raised in Portugal, educated in France, worked in Switzerland, worked in the United States. So he knows something about culture and different cultures.
Something. Yeah. Now, if you whether you are going to be with us in person or whether you are watching from afar as one of our online family members, don't miss out on Freud, because last time he had a great message, and I'm looking forward to hearing him again. And what's this? It's in.
And there's also, it's worth saying that there's going to be a little bit of an announcement with Freud.
Oh, that's right. I heard we're working on something. I probably should have dubbed deeper in that. Maybe.
A good announcement, not a bad one.
Good. That's a good idea. Don't let them hang and be like, hey, start getting text messages right away. No, be a good announcement. And then like a week or two after that, we've got another big announcement coming up.
Another one.
Yeah, I would say actually probably the week,
there'll be the week following.
the week following, and then the week following that. The big announcement will be doing it. Anyway, it's going to be great.
It's going to be great. And then, like, if you can imagine this, folks, right after that, it's going to be like, hey, in 2 weeks, church retreat. Have you, wholelife.church/church retreat.
I think Easter happens first.
Oh, do we have to get to Easter? Well, it'll be, that's right, because it's in April this year. My bad. That'd be like a month away. But then it'll be Easter, and then after Easter, you're going to be like, holy cow, it is church retreat, and I haven't done my
I am exhausted
due
already.
diligence. I know, just thinking about it making me a little tired.
Everybody needs to pray for Melanie for the next couple of weeks, because she's going to be digging into her revisions to her dissertation, right?
Yes,
next
that's
week,
right.
we're
I will
gonna-
not be here next week.
No, we're going to
But
give
Freud
you
is going to be here,
That's
right?
We'll give the microphone to Freud. He's going to hate that.
Oh, he'll love it.
He'll love it.
Last
He'll
time,
love it.
last time he fought me tooth and nail. I had to drag him in here, but
Yeah,
that's
but
all right.
that was just his initiation.
You and I
He's-
can
he's
tag
good
team
now.
him if we
That's
have
if
to.
we need to. Yeah, we'll have to. Sorry, Freud, if you're listening. But
I'm not
get
sorry
prepared.
at all.
Get prepared. Next week it's on. So awesome. Well, that's it for this week, guys. Thank you so much. And if you have anything you'd like to add or subtract, well, you can't subtract it, but you can add to it. You can disagree with it. You can comment on it. 407-965-1607 or podcast at wholelife.church. Thanks for listening and have a great week.